There is a small enclosed space at Royal Ascot that most people in the crowd never think about. Yet inside the royal household, it is treated as one of the most carefully guarded spots in the country. It is the royal box, and around it sits a whole system of unwritten rules about who belongs where, who arrives in which carriage, and who is allowed past the small barriers that the public never sees. In the summer of 2025, that system became the subject of a story that spread across the internet at remarkable speed. The story claimed that Prince William had walked out of Royal Ascot in anger after discovering Queen Camilla's relatives seated in the private box. It was dramatic, it was emotional, and it traveled fast. There was only one problem with it. It did not happen. To understand why a rumor like that could take hold so easily, you first have to understand what Royal Ascot actually is, and why every seat and every carriage carries so much meaning inside the monarchy. Royal Ascot is one of the oldest fixtures in the British calendar. The racecourse was founded in 1711 by Queen Anne as a place for horses fit for kings, and the royal family has been tied to it ever since. The most recognizable part of each day is the carriage procession, when horse-drawn carriages carry the monarch and selected guests across the course in front of the crowds. In 2025, that tradition reached a special milestone. The procession marked 200 years since it was first introduced by King George IV in 1825, and it remains one of the cornerstones of the British summer, alongside the Chelsea Flower Show and the Palace Garden parties. It was also an event with deep personal meaning for the family, because it had been especially close to the heart of the late Queen Elizabeth. What few outside the palace realize is how much planning goes into something that looks effortless. The people who ride in those carriages are not chosen at random. Each day the monarch and the consort ride in the procession with other members of the family and special guests, who have usually been invited to lunch at Windsor Castle beforehand. There are normally 4 carriages, each carrying 4 people, and the order is arranged roughly by precedence, with the most senior royals placed toward the front, while the household also tries to spread family members across the procession. Even the badges guests wear carry meaning. The small name tags that some royals wear at Ascot are not decoration. They serve as a signal of admission into certain areas and boxes at the racecourse. So inside this world, placement really does send a message. The order of the carriages, the company a person keeps in them, and the company allowed into the box are all read, by those who follow the family closely, as quiet signals about standing and closeness to the crown. This is exactly why a story about the wrong people sitting in the royal box sounds believable to anyone who knows how seriously the household takes these details. The rumor was built on a real truth, that placement matters, and then stretched into an event that never took place. Here is what actually happened in 2025. The week of Royal Ascot ran across 5 days in the middle of June, and the King and Queen attended throughout. This was no small thing, because of the year King Charles was having. Charles, who is 76 and undergoing treatment for cancer, was expected to attend on each of the 5 days, and the outing came during an unusually busy run of public engagements for him. He arrived with Queen Camilla in the first carriage of the procession, which set off shortly after 2 in the afternoon. Day after day, the photographs told the same simple story. The king wore a classic gray suit with a black top hat, while Camilla appeared in a white ensemble with a striking hat, and the pair looked relaxed and cheerful as they greeted the crowds, even though their own horses did not have much luck on the track. Far from being a week of hidden conflict, Ascot 2025 was unmistakably a family affair. On the Gold Cup day in particular, the royal party was crowded with relatives. On June 19, with temperatures climbing to a sweltering 84 degrees, Charles and Camilla were joined by his sister Princess Anne and her husband Sir Tim Lawrence, by Prince Edward and his wife Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, by his niece Princess Beatrice and her husband Edoardo Mapelli Mazzi, and by Anne's daughter Zara Tyndall and her husband Mike Tyndall. The carriages were full of the king's own family, riding together in plain public view. Earlier in the week, the party had also included other familiar faces. On the opening day, Charles and Camilla were joined by Princess Anne, by Anne's son Peter Phillips and his partner Harriet Sperling, and by the author Anthony Horowitz, a guest that fit with Camilla's well-known support for reading and literacy. If anything, the most genuinely emotional thread of the week had nothing to do with seating disputes. It was an absence. On the Wednesday, Prince William attended on his own. His wife Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had pulled out at the last minute as she carefully managed her return to royal duties during her recovery from cancer treatment. This is where one small detail almost certainly helped feed the later confusion. There had been a mistake in the published plan. An inaccurate carriage listing was initially issued by Royal Ascot, which had said the Prince and Princess of Wales would ride in the second carriage. After the change, William instead sat in the first carriage alongside Prince Saud bin Khalid Al Saud of Saudi Arabia, together with King Charles and Queen Camilla. Think carefully about that for a moment because it matters. The original plan was changed, a published list turned out to be wrong, and the heir to the throne ended up in a different carriage than the public had first been told. To anyone hunting for a scandal, those facts could be twisted into a tale of last-minute drama and hurt feelings. In reality, the cause was far gentler. Catherine was said to be disappointed that she could not attend, and those close to her explained that she was simply finding the right balance as she worked her way back to public engagements after her cancer treatment. The carriage change was a practical adjustment to her absence, not a sign of conflict between William and Camilla. So the true picture of Royal Ascot 2025 is almost the opposite of the viral story. Rather than walking out, William rode in the front carriage with the King and Queen. Rather than the family fracturing in public, the relatives gathered around Charles in unusual numbers, especially on the hottest and busiest day. And rather than a week of cold tension, the lasting images were of a king attending faithfully through his cancer treatment, a queen at his side, and a wider family showing up to support them. There was even a tender personal note to close the week. The final day of the 2025 races fell on June 21, which was Prince William's 43rd birthday, and ahead of the day's events, the king dedicated a message to his son. That is hardly the behavior of a family supposedly torn apart days earlier over a seating chart. This brings us to the harder question. If none of the dramatic story was true, why did so many people believe it, and why did it spread so widely? Part of the answer is that the monarchy genuinely runs on symbolism, and that makes it the perfect subject for invented drama. Because placement and precedence really do carry weight, a claim about the wrong family in the royal box does not feel impossible. It feels like exactly the kind of thing that could happen. The story borrowed the real seriousness of royal protocol and used it as a costume for a moment that was simply made up. Another part of the answer lies in the long and well-documented history of Queen Camilla's place within the family. For many years, she was one of the most debated figures in British public life, treated for a long time as an outsider and met with open resistance before she was gradually accepted and eventually crowned. That history is real, and it left a lasting impression on the public imagination. Because there was once genuine friction around her role, stories that hint at fresh tension between her side of the family and the direct line of succession find a ready audience. People remember the old arguments, and a new rumor only needs to brush against that memory to feel plausible. There is also the simple matter of how this kind of content is now produced. A great deal of so-called royal news online is not reporting at all. It is narration built on phrases like sources say, insiders claim, and palace whispers, none of which can be checked, traced, or held to account. These stories rarely name a real journalist, a real outlet, or a real document. They describe private thoughts that no one could possibly have witnessed, and they present guesses about feelings as if they were facts. The walkout tale carried every one of these warning signs. It described William's inner reaction in detail. It quoted unnamed insiders at length, and it offered no verifiable source for any of it. It is worth pausing on how different that is from how real royal coverage works. Genuine reporting can be confirmed. We know who rode in which carriage because photographers captured it and recognized outlets recorded it. We know why Catherine was absent because that was reported clearly and consistently. We even know small background details, such as the identity of the household's most senior officer. The Lord Chamberlain, Richard Benyon, who was appointed in November 2024, is the most senior courtier in the royal household, and he happens to have a personal link to the Princess of Wales's family, since Pippa Middleton was married on his estate in 2017. That is the texture of real reporting. It points to people, places, and records that can be checked. The viral walkout story pointed to nothing at all. None of this means the monarchy is free of tension. Every large family has its strains, and a family that also happens to be a national institution carries pressures most of us will never face. There have been reports over the years of disagreements over titles, roles, and visibility, and some of those reports are more credible than others. But the honest approach is to keep a clear line between what is documented and what is merely claimed. A disagreement that a respected outlet has reported with named context sits in one category. A dramatic walkout invented for a video with no source and no evidence sits in another. Treating the two as equal does a disservice to the audience and to the people being written about. The deeper point is about the royal box itself, the very thing the rumor was built around. The reason placement matters so much in the monarchy is that the institution communicates through images as much as through words. A lineup on a balcony, the order of a procession, the company kept in a carriage. These are the sentences the public reads about who stands at the center of national life. The late Queen Elizabeth understood this better than almost anyone, and those who study the family often point to her belief that clarity in royal imagery was part of what kept the institution steady through difficult years. That belief is one reason the carriage procession is arranged with such care, and one reason a misplaced name on a listing can cause a stir even when nothing is actually wrong. In 2025, that careful system did exactly what it was designed to do. When plans changed because of Catherine's withdrawal, the household adjusted, the procession went ahead, and the king arrived in the first carriage with his family around him. The machinery of protocol absorbed a real-world change quietly and kept the public picture clear. There was no crisis to manage, because there was no crisis. The only disruption came afterward online, from a story that the real day never produced. It is easy to see why the dramatic version is more tempting to share. A king attending the races faithfully through cancer treatment, a daughter-in-law stepping back to protect her recovery, a father sending his son a birthday message, a family gathering in the heat of a June afternoon. These are quiet, human things. They do not carry the jolt of a furious prince storming out of a stand. But quiet and human is what actually happened, and there is a kind of dignity in it that the invented story completely misses. The lasting lesson of Royal Ascot 2025 is not about a walkout that never occurred. It is about how a single grain of truth, the genuine importance of placement inside the monarchy, can be spun into something that feels real and yet is not. The royal box does matter. Precedence does carry meaning. Camilla's path into the family was genuinely difficult. All of that is true, and all of it can be told honestly without inventing a scene that never happened. In the end, the most striking image of that week was not an empty chair left behind by an angry prince. It was a 76-year-old king, undergoing treatment for cancer, climbing into a horse-drawn carriage for the third time in 4 days to honor a tradition 2 centuries old, with his wife beside him and his family gathered close. That is the picture the cameras actually captured, and it tells a far more interesting story than the one the internet decided to tell instead.